January 6th, 1982, Breckenridge, Colorado. A ski town wrapped in snow where the cold doesn't just bite, it swallows. By evening, a blizzard is building in the mountains, visibility is collapsing, and the roads are turning into white tunnels. Two women, hours apart, try to make it home the way people did back then, by accepting a ride, trusting the routine, trusting the town. And then, both of them vanish into that storm, like the night simply erased them. When investigators finally begin to piece together what happened with reported sightings, the scattered evidence, and the brutal silence of the mountain passes, there's one detail that doesn't make sense at first. A small, almost ridiculous detail. Something you'd never expect to matter in a murder investigation. But it's that one detail, an orange sock, that quietly ties the stories together. And then years pass, decades. The storm clears, the town moves on, and the case goes cold, until science catches up to secrets people thought would stay buried forever. This is the story of a blizzard night in Colorado, and the clue that refused to disappear. This is the story of the Orange Sock murders. Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest cases from around South Asia. I'm your host Ashwarya.
And I'm Aryan.
And the case that I have for you today is one of the most baffling and intriguing mysteries I've ever read about.
I'm so glad we started this segment of our show where we cover international cases. But like we've discussed in the past, some of these cases are so much it's from a research POV fun for us because we get to explore literally new territories,
different cultures, different people, different routines, something like hitchhiking, which is in this story, just not an Indian concept that we would ever read in our stories. So it's just intriguing.
So but you take us to Colorado, a state that I absolutely love and I've never been to. I've only heard of. I only passed through it in a train, but I haven't been to. But I've heard it's beautiful and
I've been to Colorado once and I remember flying on top and you see the Rockies. And I feel like obviously we have gorgeous mountains in India, but we're never kind of flying right over them because of the way they're situated, the really big ones. Flying over the Rockies is just one of the most breathtaking sights I've ever seen. And this cold winter town is just something eerie about that setting. So I'll take you to this story.
Before taking us to the story, if you want more cool episodes from around the world and India that you're not going to get on the main feed, become a patron or join the YouTube membership program. Exclusive episodes every month, early access every week, ad-free, this free, that free, but it's paid. So go become if you have spare change lying around, and buy the book if you have spare change lying around. And if you have no spare change, hit the subscribe button. And Ashwarya, get on with the story.
Let's do it. Chapter 1. SOS in the Rockies. A moonless night in the Rocky Mountains, January 6th, 1982. Snow has been dumping for hours over Colorado as temperatures plummet. Far above the ski lights of Breckenridge, on a remote mountain pass, a pickup truck is stuck in a snowdrift. Its lone driver, disoriented and stranded in the blizzard, flashes his headlights frantically in Morse code. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. And somehow, incredibly, an airline passenger on a plane in the sky spots the distress signal and alerts authorities. Park County Fire Chief Dave Montoya braves the storm, crawling up Guanella Pass to find the stuck truck. Inside is a local miner, Alan Phillips, shivering and sporting a fresh bruise across his face. Phillips tells the chief that he had hit his head after wandering in the snow, but looked relieved to have found help. Chief Montoya was relieved too that he had found a survivor and not a casualty. But little did Chief Montoya know that while he was helping Alan Phillips, tragedy had already begun down in Breckenridge. Down there in the cozy bars of Breckenridge that night, locals were huddling together to seek refuge from the storm, unaware that 2 members of their community had just vanished. The night continues as usual for everyone, and January 6th turns into January 7th. In the thin air of Hoosier Pass, at an elevation of 11,542 feet, the new snow glitters. But in town, Jeff Oberholzer is panicked. His wife, 29-year-old Barbara Bobby Jo Oberholzer, never came home last night. The Oberholzers had recently relocated from the Midwest, free spirits who made the mountains their home. Bobby Jo was known for her adventurous, easygoing side. Bobby Jo was free-spirited, her older sister Laurie recalled. She loved life. She was happy wherever she was, she said. In 1977, Bobby and Jeff married and moved to the tiny town of Alma, half an hour from Breckenridge, chasing the Colorado dream as self-described hippies. By 1982, Bobby Jo was working as a receptionist for a real estate company in Breckenridge, while Jeff was running an appliance repair shop in town. And to get to and from work, they often relied on the era's common custom, hitchhiking to get around. Quote, people would look for you. They saw you standing by the side of the road. They'd pick you up, Jeff explained of the trust in their community back then. Still, Jeff worried about the dangers of hitching rides, so he had made Bobby Jo a crude self-defense tool himself, a hefty brass key hook he thought she could swing as a weapon if she ever needed to. Yesterday had been a happy day for Bobby Jo. Despite the frigid weather forecast, she hitched a ride into town as usual, and that afternoon she was informed of a surprise job promotion. She had called Jeff, excited. She told him she'd grab some celebratory drinks with friends after work, but would be home soon. Jeff was so happy for her, and everything seemed fine. But as midnight came and went with no sign of Bobby Jo, Jeff's worry slowly began. This wasn't like her at all. In the dead of night, he drove to a friend's house where Bobby Jo had been celebrating. Groggy and alarmed, they told him that Bobby left the village pub, a local pub, around 7:30 p.m., supposedly catching a ride home. But Jeff knew she never made it home, and so he raced to Breckenridge police, only to be told it was too early to file a missing persons report. Frustrated, he returned to their empty home in Alma that night and tried all night to fall asleep till he could make his way to the police station again. But at 8 a.m. the next morning, January 7th, a phone ringing jolted him out of his half-sleep. Turns out, moments earlier, a rancher from 30 miles away had reported finding Bobby's driver's license and belongings scattered in his driveway. Now Jeff knows something is horribly wrong, and so he, in tow with his two closest friends, jumps into a vehicle and speeds towards the ranch. But on the roadside en route, Jeff spots a blue object against the white snow and just immediately knows what it is. Bobby's backpack, half buried in the snow. As he steps out to look at it closer, what he sees near it is even eerier. One of Bobby's wool gloves covered in blood and a bloody tissue partly frozen in the snow. Jeff's stomach drops. With fear now mounting, he and his friends continue driving along the route Bobby Jo would have taken home over Hoosier Pass, and by mid-morning, they reach the summit parking area of the pass where Bobby might have caught a last ride. The group grabs cross-country skis and everyone fans out over the pristine snow to look for her. And it doesn't take long. Off the side of the road, in a bank of drifted snow, they find her. Bobby Jo's lifeless body lies face down in the snow. The young wife who yesterday was celebrating life, now brutally killed. The joyful spark that Jeff fell in love with, all gone in an instant, and within moments, the picturesque area is swarming with police who begin documenting the odd, heartbreaking scene. Bobby Jo's body is fully clothed, partially frozen by the overnight sub-zero temperatures, her keys with the brass defensive hook lying in the snow nearby, as if dropped or yanked off, and zip ties bite into her wrists, binding her left hand, a chilling sign that she had been restrained to something.
Ash, I got so absorbed in the tale of the couples that I suddenly remembered there's a different story right in the beginning.
Correct.
And you are, known for your storytelling tools, so I don't know how you join them later. But I just want to confirm the timeline. So a little bit of housekeeping. This is all happening the evening of the same day.
Same day, that's
Evening of the same day where there is a storm about to take place. At this point, now that the police has come together to figure out what happened to Jo, Have they connected one to one?
They haven't, because that was Deputy Chief Montoya, not the same department. I think when you're called to have a rescue operation of someone stuck in the snow, it's not quite the same as a homicide investigation. So I think different teams alerted for that. No connections have been made. It's just that what a wild day for authorities, law enforcement across Breckenridge in the area. But yeah, this is only just the beginning.
Yeah, storms brewing.
Storms are brewing. Now, there are no other footprints around the body apart from Bobby's own, as if she was alone out there in her final moments. Snowflakes have gently covered any traces of the killer. At close range, Bobby Jo was shot twice in the chest, injuries that ended her life. She appears to have broken free and run a short distance before collapsing in the snow, one hand still cinched with a plastic zip tie. For the tight-knit mountain community, a crime of this brutality is unheard of, and it's about to get stranger. Among the scant evidence collected, former Colorado Bureau of Investigation or CBI agent Jim Hartke notes one baffling thing. Lying in the parking lot not far from Bobby's body is a single orange sock, a small knit ankle bootie. It clearly doesn't belong to Bobby Jo or anything she was wearing. Quote, "It didn't fit anything connected with Bobby," Hartke recalls, describing it as just a mysterious stray clue. Puzzled, detectives bag the orange sock, not yet realizing its importance. Jeff, meanwhile, is broken. When authorities place Bobby's body in a bag, he begs to see her one last time. An officer unzips the body bag, and Jeff breaks down at the sight of the woman he loved, gone forever. In the hours after this nightmare discovery, Jeff Oberholzer finds himself going from grieving husband to prime suspect with dizzying speed. Standard procedure in cases of murdered wives is to look hard at the spouse, and detectives note that Jeff was the last person to hear from Bobby, and that her body turned up near the route between Breckenridge and the Oberholzer home. As Jeff weeps for his wife, investigators eye him. The very next day, they haul Jeff in for questioning, and Hartke, one of the lead investigators on the case now, doesn't mince words. Quote, "I told him he's the number one suspect," Hartke later recalls. But Jeff doesn't mince words either. "No," he says every time he's asked if he had any idea who could have hurt Bobby Jo. But to police, tears alone don't prove innocence. With little else to go on, they must consider that this could be an instance of domestic violence or a staged crime scene. Jeff's nightmare is only just beginning. But just as police begin probing this theory a little, an almost unbelievable development landed on their desk, one that will turn this case upside down. On January 8th, 1982, just one day after Bobby's body was found, a call comes in from Summit County on the other side of the pass. A young woman has been reported missing in Breckenridge, and she hasn't been seen since the same day Bobby Jo disappeared. Chapter 2. Annette is Missing. In Sioux City, Iowa, the phone rang at the Schnee household on January 8th, 1982. Cindy French, only 11 years old, listened as her mother answered the rotary phone. Cindy heard her mother's voice break into tears. "What's wrong?" she asked her mom. Her mother's answer would forever divide their lives into a before and an after. Annette is missing. Annette K. Schnee, 21, was Cindy's big sister, practically a second mother to her younger siblings. Just a year earlier, full of ambition, Annette had left Iowa to build a life in Colorado's high country. She was a hard-working, adventurous girl with plans to become a flight attendant one day, and in Breckenridge, Annette thrived. She roomed with friends and juggled 2 jobs to make ends meet: housekeeping at the Holiday Inn during the day and cocktail waitressing at a local bar in the evenings. She didn't own a car, so like many locals, like Bobby Jo, Annette often hitchhiked to work and around town. On January 6, 1982, that same fateful day Jeff realized Bobby Jo hadn't returned home, Annette worked her day shift at the Holiday Inn in Frisco, and after clocking out, stopped by a doctor's office, after which she hitched a ride into Breckenridge to fill a prescription at a drugstore. The last confirmed sighting of Annette was around 4:30 p.m. at Breckenridge Pharmacy, where a witness remembered her chatting with an unidentified dark-haired woman. Annette brought her medication and presumably set out to hitchhike home, or perhaps to her evening waitress job. Somewhere between Breckenridge and her destination, Annette vanished. When she failed to show up for her night shift, alarm bells rang among her co-workers. By January 8, a co-worker officially reported Annette missing. The timing was eerie. Annette disappeared just hours before Bobby Joe Oberholzer went missing. Annette in the late afternoon, Bobby Joe in the early evening of January 6th. Two women, close in age, vanishing separately on the same snowy day in the same area. It seemed too bizarre to be a coincidence, and Agent Jim Hartke immediately suspected a link. Quote, Annette was last seen around 4:30 p.m., Bobby Joe around 7:30 p.m. From the outset, I suspected the two cases might be connected, he said. When news of Annette's disappearance reached her family in Iowa, her older sister, Karen Reason, and relatives jumped into action. Karen gathered the family and they drove through the winter roads straight to Colorado, hearts in their throats.
Knowing she hitchhiked, we figured somebody picked her up.
They clung to hope, though, that Annette might still be alive somewhere, even as a darker intuition nagged at them. Quote, in the back of your mind, you're probably thinking not. But you don't want to think that, Karen admitted of those early days. Breckenridge authorities, now grappling with two missing persons cases, one of which had ended as a homicide, scrambled to reconstruct Annette's last movements. They learned about her stops that day and that hitchhiking was common for her, a trait she shared with Bobby Joe. As inspectors began searching nearby areas and urging the public to come forward with sightings of Annette, one strange tip came from none other than Jeff Oberholzer, still the prime suspect in his wife Bobby's murder. Jeff voluntarily told police he had a gut feeling about where Annette's body might be found.
Listen, if you're the guy who did it, you don't do that.
Right.
And if you're the guy who didn't do it,
You also don't do that.
yeah, you also like keep your gut instincts to yourself.
It's that weird thing. Or if are you that stupid?
Or are you like
Or
playing? You're
You're
like
playing like double-decker chess with the cops. Like, you
My
know?
God, this is like, if this is not the guy who did, if Jeff's not the guy, this is very benevolent of him.
It's really
But
weird.
also, why do you have a
gut
hunch?
Yeah.
I have a hunch of where the dead body could be.
He's gonna tell the exact date also where he thinks it's gonna be found.
Huh? All right.
Yeah. Unlucky for him, those both will be eerily accurate.
Yeah, well, Jeff's onto something.
He's onto something. So Jeff gives police an uncannily specific prediction. He felt Annette would be found near water, roughly 4 miles from his house, and perhaps around the 4th of July. Yeah. What do you make
Who
of that?
gives a date? It's like a premonition.
Yeah, like I saw it in my dream. Like,
Oh, dude, you don't tell dreams to cops. Save that for
right,
the
just
guy.
in the off chance that out of 365 days, you
Yeah.
kind of hit it close.
No. Also, listen. It's very benevolent of him. Let me be. If he hasn't done the murder, my thing is, your wife's already sadly passed away. You don't get much from.
That's my thing, is that you don't gain anything. You're
You
not
don't
helping the
gain it.
police. There are water bodies galore in every state in the US. It's not like Colorado's any different. 4th of July, okay, you'll be somewhere close to that day. Police is not going to take that date seriously for any reason.
I mean, they will if they end up finding the body that day.
We'll talk about how we stumbled upon that. But point being, yeah, you're not giving any key information
Yeah,
to
like
the police.
I'd keep it
to
to
do
myself.
anything,
I'd
yeah.
Keep it to myself.
Yeah, I agree. Now, it was an oddly specific hunch, and coming from the widower of one victim about another missing woman, it did everything to make Jeff look like the prime suspect in this second case too. But days turned into weeks, then months without answers. Bobby Joe had been found brutally murdered, but Annette was still missing without a trace through the rest of that harsh winter and spring of 1982. The Schnee family's hope dwindled with each passing week. Quote, we were all hoping she was still alive. You do keep that hope, Karen said, describing that emotional limbo. But that hope was about to disappear on July 3rd, 1982, nearly 6 months after Annette disappeared, when a 13-year-old boy was fishing in a rural stretch of Park County, about 20 miles south of Breckenridge. Along Sacramento Creek, near the base of a valley, the boy saw a sight that went on to haunt him forever. A human body, face down in the water. It was a young woman, fully clothed, lying in the shallow creek as cold water rushed through her. The boy ran to get his father, who alerted the Park County sheriff. At last, Annette Schnee had been found, but not alive. Soon, investigators descended onto the secluded creek. It was roughly 23 miles from the Breckenridge drugstore where Annette was last seen and several miles from the nearest road. Annette's body was indeed in the vicinity Jeff Oberholzer had eerily predicted, about 7 miles from Jeff's house, a bit further than the 4 miles guessed, but chillingly close, and on July 3rd, near a water body, a day shy of the date he had foretold. This coincidence did not go unnoticed, and now police were sure Jeff knew something about Annette's murder. But for now, police were focused on the scene in front of them. Annette was found lying on her stomach in the creek, still wearing her blue jacket, jeans, and boots. A single gunshot wound pierced her back. The bullet's downward trajectory, entering from behind and exiting through her chest at a 30-degree angle, suggested a horrifying scenario. Annette may have been kneeling or running downhill when she was shot from behind. Perhaps she had bolted from a vehicle, desperately fleeing her attacker, only to be gunned down as she tried to escape. Investigators also noted troubling signs that Annette had been the victim of a sexual assault. Her clothing was in disarray, her jeans zipper was broken, and oddly, her shoes were found on the wrong feet. Such details hinted that she might have been hurriedly redressed or her clothing disturbed, consistent with a struggle and assault. No semen or definitive physical evidence of sexual assault was recovered, but the condition of her clothes strongly indicated a sexual motive to the crime. When her body was carefully transported for further analysis, crime scene techs carefully searched Annette's waterlogged remains for clues. Agent Jim Hartke attended Annette's autopsy on that day, July 4th, 1982. But as the medical examiner pulled off one of Annette's boots, Hartke's eye fell on something that made his heart skip a beat. Annette was wearing an orange sock on her left foot.
No way.
Yeah. Now what's interesting is that she was wearing an orange in one and a grey sock in the other. So it's not that she was missing a sock, which is such an interesting, odd detail. And the police have a theory.
Is it the same orange sock?
It's the same orange sock.
It's the same orange sock.
Yeah.
Okay. Just thinking out loud as to what did... Oh my God, this is so interesting.
Yeah.
In the case of Jo, did she have any sock on the other foot? Or there was... Oh no, we just found a lone sock.
A lone sock next to her body. She wasn't wearing it.
And Annette disappeared before Jo, which would mean that
That's right.
Annette was, murdered if it has the same person behind it before Jo.
Right.
That person takes her body... I mean, I don't see how do you leave unless you're playing games with the cops, unless you're like psycho to the level of trying to, like, you're like one of those killers that leaves a sign, thief, like Louvre thief will leave their sign.
Yeah, right. No, the police have a theory and they don't think it's quite that.
Can you share the theory now?
Oh, we'll get to it. And I want you to tell me what you think of the theory. I do think it makes sense. But it's that thing where it's such a random clue. You can fill in the pieces.
Yeah,
as
you can reverse
engineer in many different modalities.
But I'm not able to come up with one coherent. I can think of some, but none that I...
So, okay, let me just tell you the police's theory. Is that Annette was sexually assaulted or in the process of, and she was undressed for whatever reason.
Yeah.
When Annette is redressing, she cannot find the second sock, her other grey sock. And so she pulls out a new pair from her bag, which is the orange. She wears the one orange instead of the one sock she can't find.
Sure.
Dropping the one orange in the killer's car. And when the killer has killed Bobby Joe, they've mistakenly dropped the second orange that Annette never wore next to her body.
That's... I mean, that could be the
Because
case.
her clothing, Annette's clothing is in disarray. It seems like she was undressed and redressed.
And there were more clothes in her bag to show that she
That I don't know.
Yeah, because that'd be weird if she was just carrying an extra pair of socks.
But she does clearly have 2 pairs of socks.
Yeah, I mean, that is assuming that he hasn't placed the socks himself.
But then the modality still stays the same, where she maybe lost a sock. So she took... I also highly doubt her killer is about to give her socks.
Yeah, true.
Now, the moment Detective Hartke saw this, his mind immediately flashed back to the inexplicable orange sock his team had found near Bobby Joe's body on Hoosier Pass. Could it be? A spark of realization. Quote, holy this ties the cases together, Hartke thought. Indeed, Annette was wearing the mate's sock to the stray sock from Bobby's crime scene. Now, there was no doubt the murders of Bobby Joe Oberholzer and Annette Schnee were directly connected, and investigators soon pieced together a probable chronology like the one I explained to Aryan. Annette had likely been picked up by the killer earlier that evening, which was around 5 p.m. while hitchhiking home. At some point, perhaps on a secluded dead-end road, he assaulted her. As she hastily dressed in the aftermath, she managed to put on one long wool sock but couldn't find its pair, so she grabbed an orange ankle booty sock from her bag or pocket and put it on the other foot. The killer then drove the terrified Annette to the remote creek. Annette tried to escape, but he shot her in the back as she fled downhill. Her body fell where it was later found, and the killer left her there in the water. Sometime later that same night, the killer returned to the town, possibly even back to Breckenridge, and encountered Bobby Joe outside the pub where she'd been celebrating. Accepting a ride from him, Bobby was then driven up Hoosier Pass. There, the killer likely attempted to restrain and assault her too. The zip tie on her wrist and the defensive wounds suggest Bobby fought back ferociously. In the struggle, the orange sock that had belonged to Annette, still lying in the killer's vehicle, got accidentally kicked out onto the snow when Bobby Joe leapt from the truck trying to escape.
You say she fought ferociously. That would mean that if it was Jeff, Jeff would have some signs of struggle. Were there any?
No. There were none.
All right. Okay.
Now, once Bobby Joe leapt from the truck to try and escape, the killer chased her into the woods, shooting her twice and leaving her to die on that mountain pass. The two women, who likely never met, ended up bound by a terrifying thread. One orange sock on Annette's foot and its twin left near Bobby's bloodstained body. Beside the sock, though, investigators found one more link between the victims. In the pocket of Annette's jacket, they discovered a business card for Jeff Oberholzer's appliance repair shop. That was a bombshell connection. Jeff, the widower of one victim, had apparently met the other victim before her death. Confronted, Jeff recalled that a couple of months earlier, in November 1981, he had indeed given a ride to a young hitchhiker named Annette and handed out his business card, and that he routinely gave his business cards to hitchhikers as a way to advertise.
I'm a 25 kind of guy. Having somebody's business card and then dying, and then their wife dying too, pretty much, to me is like, dude, you were involved.
Right?
Back in the 80s, maybe business cards were so as common as
Instagram
even if
usernames.
They
were, for that to be like the only business card found months later in someone's jacket, like, are people not cleaning out their pockets? Are people not cleaning their jackets?
I know, but she was a frequent hitchhiker. He was married to a hitchhiker. I can totally see him like giving rides also.
Sure, but do you understand what I'm saying about a card in someone's pocket for months?
I don't know why I'm I just, you sort of turned me towards Jeff for a second. Now I'm like, I'm just having a conflicting emotional experience
now.
This is
a case of conflicting emotional
I thought Jeff was a good, when you said was unharmed in the ferocious fight, no marks of...
Yeah, marks of struggle were on Bobby Joe.
Yeah, but you said she fought back ferociously.
Yeah, we know that from struggle on her own body, that she would have tried to fight
she would have tried. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, no, technically, if someone has fought back ferociously,
yeah, I mean, there
usually
is also, even if the assailant, like there's a power disparity, there is some, we've covered many of those. Anyway, I think I'll talk less.
Now, Jeff insisted this was a brief, one-time encounter and that he had nothing to do with Annette's murder or Bobby's. Nonetheless, in the eyes of law enforcement, this coincidence was staggering. Two murdered women, both hitchhikers, both tied to Jeff Oberholzer. Quote, the fact that two victims would both be associated with one individual made the focus on Jeff as the primary suspect, a sheriff told the press. Small town gossip lit up with whispers. Was it possible Jeff had some dark, secret side? Now, police pressed Jeff hard and asked him to take a polygraph test, which he passed, showing no sign of deception in denying involvement.
I'm back on Team Jeff.
It's so weird. Jeff to me is so weird.
Okay, at this point, what's the gossip in the town? Okay, give me the tea. What's the gossip in the town about what's like... but why? Why would he do? What's the... you've painted the picture of a loving couple. Yeah. What are the neighbors?
See, I would say there is a sexual motive if one of them wasn't his wife. Random hitchhiking two women who were connected to Jeff Oberholzer wouldn't make me lean that way. But that's clearly not it, because one of them is a woman he loved and was living with.
Yeah.
To murder her doesn't really make sense randomly. I can connect Jeff to two random murders. I can't connect Jeff to the murder of his wife and a random murder on the same night. It's just really weird to me.
Yeah.
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 But Jeff's behavior, his prediction,
Yeah.
the card, it's too much. Despite the polygraph test, though, Jeff remained under a cloud of suspicion in the court of public opinion and in the private eyes of the law. By mid-1982, the case of Bobby Joe and Annette had become infamous in Colorado. The press dubbed it the, quote, Orange Sock Murders, and the community of Breckenridge was shaken to its core. This was a sunny ski resort town where young people came for seasonal work and mountain adventure, a place where hitchhiking was normal and violent crime was rare to non-existent. Now, with a double homicide and a possible predator in their midst, the idyllic mountain town lost its innocence. The murders, quote, rocked the small towns of Summit and Park counties. Residents who once prided themselves on the safety of their community began locking doors at night, and women were warned by authorities to stop hitchhiking. One ski instructor told a reporter he had started driving his girlfriend to work every day, whereas before she'd catch rides on her own. The carefree, footloose spirit of Breckenridge's early 80s youth scene evaporated overnight, replaced by fear and suspicion. Detective Wendy Kipple, who lived in the area at the time, remembers that back then. Quote, we were footloose and fancy-free, never giving the first thought that something could happen to us. End quote. That attitude was gone. A murderer was out there. Chapter 3. Dead Ends. Despite extensive investigations through 1982, leads in the Orange Sock case were frustratingly few. The immediate suspect, Jeff Oberholzer, continued to maintain his innocence, and aside from the eerie coincidence of his business card and his own wife being a victim and the prediction of Annette's discovery, no hard evidence tied Jeff to either crime. In fact, over the next few months, quite the opposite happened. The man many people were sure was behind this was proven innocent using physical evidence from Bobby's scene. Tests showed the blood found on Bobby Joe's glove and the tissue near her body came from Bobby Joe and an unknown male, but not from Jeff. By the end of 1982, Jeff was tentatively cleared by investigators, who told him, quote, in my book, you're not a suspect, as Detective Sergeant Wendy Kipple later recounted. Yet officially, the case remained open and unsolved. And so began decades of a cold case that haunted everyone involved. That doesn't mean people stopped trying, though. Far from it. For nearly 40 years, a revolving cast of detectives, family members, and one extraordinarily persistent private investigator kept the hunt for the killer alive. Early on, one promising suspect emerged. Tom Luther, a drifter with a violent streak. Just 6 weeks after Bobby and Annette's murders, in February 1982, another young woman hitchhiking in Summit County was brutally attacked, beaten with a hammer, and sexually assaulted by a man who had picked her up. The survivor identified Tom Luther as her assailant, and Luther was arrested and convicted for that sexual assault, after which he was sent to prison for 10 years. Given the timing and location, investigators eyed Luther hard for the Orange Sock murders. He clearly had a penchant for targeting female hitchhikers. Luther, however, denied any involvement in Bobby Joe and Annette's cases. He did have a history of violence against women, acknowledged Deputy DA Mark Hurlbert, and, quote, law enforcement thought they had their guy for a while. But there was no direct evidence linking Luther to the 1982 murders. No DNA, no witnesses, nothing concrete. Eventually, Luther was ruled out, or at least set aside as a suspect, especially once better forensic evidence from the scene indicated a different man. Luther's shadow, however, would linger in the case file for years as an unresolved question mark, periodically re-examined, like in 1995, when detectives again revisited Luther's possible role, only to hit another dead end once again. Meanwhile, the families of the victims endured years of agony with no answers. Annette's family returned to Iowa to bury their beloved daughter and sister. Cindy French, Annette's baby sister, grew up haunted by not knowing who took Annette's life or why. Quote, he took a really good person away from this world, Cindy later said of the unknown killer. Bobby Joe's family and friends had their own cross to bear, not only mourning Bobby but also dealing with the suspicion that had initially fallen on Jeff. Small town gossip can be cruel, and some surely wondered if Jeff, quote, got away with it even after police unofficially cleared him. Jeff himself had to live with that stigma in the community for years. For a long time, justice for Bobby and Annette seemed out of reach. Quote, truthfully, I didn't think it would ever happen, admitted Annette's other sister, Karen, regarding finding the killer. But one man refused to let it go cold. Charlie McCormick, a former Denver homicide detective turned private investigator who moved to the Breckenridge area in the late 1970s. When Bobby Joe and Annette were killed in 1982, McCormick was, quote, done with murder cases, burned out from years of investigating homicides in the city. He watched the case unfold from the sidelines, as disturbed as everyone else in the community, but also admittedly relieved it wasn't his responsibility at the time. As the local police and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation struggled through 1982 and 1983 with no success, McCormick recalls thinking, I'm glad I'm not working that one. By 1984, with the investigation stalling, Bobby Joe's murder and Annette's murder were officially designated cold cases. But in 1989, 7 years after the killings, Detective Richard Eaton of the Summit County Sheriff's Office was tasked with revisiting the double murder file. Completely by chance, Eaton bumped into McCormick at the courthouse, and over lunch they got to talking about the unsolved case. McCormick felt the old detective spark reignite. He offered to take a look at the case files with fresh eyes, no charge. Eaton, likely swamped with other duties, was happy for the help and handed over 2 fat binders of case documents. McCormick devoured the files in a single weekend. Quote, I don't even remember sleeping, he said of that marathon read. By Monday, he returned to Detective Eaton with a list of 50 investigative tasks to pursue, new leads, angles, and interviews. It just kind of lit my fire, McCormick said. I've been on it ever since. Thus began an extraordinary private crusade. McCormick formally signed on as a private investigator working for Annette Schnee's family at the token fee of $1 a year. For decades, he doggedly chased every shred of information, teaming up with law enforcement when he could and going solo when he had to.
Ishwara, is there different laws around PIs in America where they have some authority, or is it just like a complete hobby job in the sense that you have to, whatever you scour is on your own and law enforcement will not aid you? Because, whenever PIs come up in American cases we cover, if a PI tried that in India, the police would give him one tight slap and tell him get the hell out of here. Literally nikal yahan se.
Right.
What are you doing?
I think what helps him is that he is former law enforcement.
Sure, I'm sure it does. But in so many cases, they aren't like, they're just professional PIs. I mean, there are entire films in the US. What's that, the former James Bond character that plays that detective in the Netflix series? Very popular one.
Netflix James Bond series?
No. The Knives Out.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, their PIs are glorified.
Sure.
Okay, the glorified PIs.
Right.
Our PIs, they come on podcasts
Daniel Craig
and they're
is
like
not quite,
cheating. We found spouse doing this.
Right.
I don't know. It just feels like
I actually don't know the official
their
ruling
PIs
on that.
seem. I'm sure there is something around PIs, because is there a license you need as a PI? I'd be curious to learn how America deals with it, because I know there are far more PIs there and are far more glorified than at least here in India.
So McCormick and Detective Eaton and later others ran down leads across the country, from New Jersey to West Virginia. Some tips bordered on the absurd. For example, a psychic's vision of the killer on a highway, which McCormick did follow up with, by the way, while others were tantalizing. Like in the late 1980s, there was an armed carjacker in the region whose crimes raised eyebrows in connection to the murders. But that lead fizzled out too. But then, perhaps the biggest development in the 1990s came, the advent of DNA profiling. In 1989, Charlie McCormick ensured that key evidence from Bobby Joe's scene, the bloody glove and tissue, was tested with emerging DNA technology. The results were a mixed blessing. On one hand, they conclusively cleared Jeff Oberholzer. The blood from the glove yielded a mixed DNA profile. That's right, go Jeff. But on the other hand, there was still that unknown male DNA that nobody knew where it came from. After that, Jeff was fully and finally exonerated in the eyes of the law, lifting that cloud of suspicion from him. But on the other hand, that unknown profile, it didn't even match anyone in the existing criminal database. In 2002, the DNA profile was uploaded to the National CODIS, which is the Combined DNA Index System, which is the FBI's national DNA database system. And there were no hits. The killer's genetic fingerprint was essentially lying dormant, waiting for a name to be attached to it. Through the 2000s and 2010s, the DNA was rechecked periodically as the databases grew, but still no match. It was as if the perpetrator had never committed another crime that produced a DNA sample, or at least one that was in the system. All the while, McCormick kept digging, and the families kept faith as best as they could. Annette's mother passed away without seeing justice for her daughter, never knowing who or why. Bobby's family similarly endured the slow drip of years. Quote, "I was cheated out of 40 years without my sister," Laurie Merlot would later say, reflecting on all of the milestones Bobby never got to experience. Bobby's sisters and friends kept her memory alive quietly. One of Annette's sisters even named her own daughter Annette in honor of the sister she lost. But life subtly moved on. By the late 2010s, nearly 4 decades had passed. Many of the original investigators had retired or moved on. Charlie McCormick was now 80 years old, though still stubbornly pursuing the case that he had promised not to walk away from. But time was running out, not just for the aging sleuths, but for the murderer as well. If alive, he would likely be in his 70s or 80s. The window for justice, and even for the truth, was closing. Then, in 2018, something happened in an unrelated case that would have a ripple effect across cold cases units everywhere. The arrest of the Golden State Killer in California using a revolutionary method called forensic genetic genealogy. Detectives had identified that prolific serial killer by matching DNA from his crime scenes to distant relatives in genealogy databases and constructing his family tree. The success of that case made headlines worldwide. It was a light bulb moment for many investigators clutching old DNA evidence. Maybe, just maybe, they could do the same for their unsolved crimes. In Colorado, Detective Sergeant Wendy Kipple of the Park County Sheriff's Office, who by 2019 had become deeply involved in the Orange double murder investigation, decided it was time to try this new technique on their mystery. "I knew from the start this was going to come down to DNA," Kipple said. Traditional detective work hadn't cracked it, but perhaps science finally could. Chapter 4. The Genealogy Gamble. In early 2020, Detective Sergeant Kipple picked up the phone and took a leap of faith. She contacted a Denver-based company called United Data Connect, a private firm specializing in genetic genealogy for law enforcement. Kipple's team had carefully preserved the unknown male DNA profile from Bobby Joe's glove and the bloody tissue all these years later, and they sent that sample to United Data Connect, hoping to identify the man who left his blood at the crime scene. This process would involve uploading the DNA profile in a specialized format to public genealogy databases, the kind people use to find long-lost relatives or learn about their ancestry. Detectives didn't know if it would work, but it was their best shot. For about a year, there was nothing. Then, on January 9th, 2021, Wendy Kipple received a phone call that changed everything. The genealogist on the line said, "I have 2 names for you."
Holy crap.
2021, 2022 to me of a 1980s case. This genetic genealogy stuff to me has
Yeah,
been
but
wild.
Also, I don't know if this is unique to... I don't want to say, the Americans get this right versus us, but there seems to be an incentive structure in their police system that allows people to chase leads years on, decades on. Cold cases in India aren't chased in this manner. Of course, and I've covered some that are, but those are exceptions to the rule.
Yeah.
It's very frequent that technological advancements force American cases to be reevaluated and
For sure.
reconsidered on a regular basis.
For sure.
So, almost like it's an SOP there rather than here. So, I mean,
Also, their databases are so robust.
Yeah,
I think that's also where we lack a little bit as a continent at large.
yeah.
We just have lax databases, not enough information available online, which from a privacy standpoint may be a fantastic thing.
Yeah, I mean, not to get into privacy ethics of having my 23andMe data
too.
incriminating some distant mama that has done something god awful. No,
I'm just on 23andMe.
if it does that, not that it has.
Cool.
But all right, okay. What happens next?
So the genealogist says, "I have 2 names for you." The DNA search had found a promising family connection. In fact, it pointed to 2 men, brothers with the last name Phillips. One was named Bruce Phillips and the other Alan Phillips. Neither name had ever been on investigators' radar in the 1980s. Kipple first reached out to the older brother, Bruce Phillips, who lived out of state. Bruce said he had never lived in Colorado and was estranged from his younger brother Alan, who had lived in the Breckenridge area decades ago. Now, this immediately set off alarms. Digging into records, Kipple discovered that Alan Lee Phillips had indeed been a Breckenridge local in the early 1980s. In fact, he'd worked at a mine near Breckenridge and lived in the area. And incredibly, could it be, Alan Phillips's name was familiar from an old story. He was the man who had been rescued from the snowdrift on Guanella Pass the night of January 6th.
I hate you. This is great. Good, you're a good writer, but this is annoying.
Is it?
Yeah, I forgot.
Yeah.
I told you. I knew you were going to do this, and I still forgot.
Yeah, remember the beginnings of movies. This happens to me every time. And I'm like, oh yeah, right, the movie began with this thing. It happens in Andhadhun, for example, where the beginning is that a rabbit. And at the end of the movie, I'm like, oh my God, totally forgot. So
you are the Coen brothers.
I'm that. Yeah. I'm them.
You are like Guy Ritchie,
but
you're
how
Girl
wild?
Ritchie.
I'm Girl Ritchie. How wild is this?
Remind me, who was the one who rescued that the fellow?
Detective Montoya from one of the local law enforcement departments.
But you're saying did they connect the story of Alan? Like, was it a story that was passed down?
It appeared on the same newspaper as Bobby Joe, found dead and minor rescued the same night. No one has joined the dots. Is there like a
clipping of that newspaper?
I'm sure we could find it.
Or if we find it, please add it. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, that would be insane.
It's wild. It's wild to me. The mystery SOS man and the suspected killer might just be one and the same. Detective Kipple's mind raced as she recalled the lore of that strange rescue. Articles about a miner saved in the storm, like I said, appearing in the same newspaper right next to stories of Bobby Joe's murder back in 82. It seemed almost too wild to be true. The killer had literally been hiding in plain sight, a victim himself of the blizzard, aided by rescuers on the very night he did the awful deed. But suspicions aren't convictions. They needed hard proof that Alan Phillips's DNA matched the unknown DNA from the crime. Phillips was now 69 years old and still lived in the Colorado mountains. Remarkably, he had remained in the area all these years, running a mechanic shop in Clear Creek County, not far from his old haunts. If he was the guy, he'd gotten away with murder for 4 decades. Kipple and her team worked quickly and quietly to confirm his DNA. They put Phillips under surveillance, tailing him as he went about his routine in early 2021. But weeks went by with no opportunity. They needed him to discard something with saliva or skin cells that they could lawfully connect. Finally, in late January 2021, Phillips stopped at a Sonic drive-in for a bite. Detectives watched as he ate, then threw away his trash in a public garbage can. After he drove off, investigators swooped in and retrieved the trash bag. Inside, among ketchup-stained wrappers, they found a used napkin with Alan Phillips's saliva on it.
This is I can't believe this.
This is out of a movie, I know. This is crazy.
This is national treasure. This is literally national. This is national treasure.
But
yeah, the
in
champagne
reality,
glass takes
I
the
know.
fingerprints off. Wow. I mean, this is amazing investigative work.
In the lab, the DNA from the napkin was extracted and compared to the crime scene DNA. And on February 23rd, 2021, the results came in. It was a match. The blood on Bobby Joe's glove and the tissue belonged to Alan Lee Phillips. For a moment, time stood still for Detective Kipple and the team. After 39 years, they finally had a name and a face for the killer. And unbelievably, it was a face some of the old-timers already knew. Phillips's background check revealed something else chilling. He had a criminal history. In 1973, almost a decade before the murders, a 22-year-old Alan Phillips had been arrested in Breckenridge for picking up a female hitchhiker and attempting to assault her near an isolated cabin. He even signed a confession back then, admitting to the assault and burglary, and spent 6 months in jail. That prior incident was an ominous precursor to what happened to Bobby and Annette, and it had all been buried in old files until Kipple dug it up. Phillips, it seemed, had a dark propensity for violence against hitchhiking women, and in 1982, he had escalated to murder. Kipple later said finding that old 1973 case file was like striking, quote, our golden egg. The pattern was clear. On February 24, 2021, under the cold winter sun, almost 39 years after the crimes, a team of officers moved in to finally arrest Alan Phillips. They executed a traffic stop near his home in Dumont, Colorado. Phillips, now a white-haired 70-year-old, was caught completely off guard. Kipple herself slapped the cuffs on him. He was shocked, she said, of Phillips's reaction at the moment of the arrest. One can only imagine Phillips had believed he'd gotten away with it forever. Perhaps he thought no one would connect an old man like him to that night of carnage in 1982. But DNA doesn't forget, and justice was finally at his door. The arrest made national headlines. This cold case, 40 years later, solved. Locals were stunned to learn that the orange sock killer had been living among them quietly, described by acquaintances as an ordinary mechanic and miner. Some who remembered Phillips's dramatic blizzard rescue back in 82 were flabbergasted. The rescuer had unknowingly saved the very man who, if the charges were true, had killed Bobby Joe and Annette just hours earlier. This was a twist too wild for fiction. As this revelation sank in, Breckenridge and Alma residents, those who still remember 1982, felt a mix of cathartic shock and anger. Phillips was soon charged with multiple counts, 2 counts of first-degree murder for each victim, along with charges of kidnapping and assault, reflecting the full heinousness of his actions. But through it all, Alan Phillips maintained his innocence. Upon pleading not guilty, he prepared to fight the charges in court, but the evidence was formidable. Investigators had not only the DNA linking him to Bobby Joe's murder, but also the newly tested orange sock itself. Forensic testing confirmed that Bobby Joe's blood was on the outside of the sock, while Annette's DNA, skin cells, were on the inside, scientifically cementing that the sock had been with Annette during her attack and then ended up at Bobby's scene. The chance of Phillips being an innocent man with explanations for all of this was virtually zero. Nonetheless, the case had to be proven in court beyond a reasonable doubt, and Phillips's defense attorneys were ready to challenge the evidence at every turn. Chapter 5. Day in Court. In summer 2022, the double murder trial of Alan Lee Phillips commenced, finally bringing the orange sock murders into a courtroom nearly 4 decades after the fact. By now, many witnesses were elderly, evidence had to be carefully authenticated due to its age, and memories of 1982 had faded. Yet, the prosecution, led by Park County Deputy District Attorney Stephanie Miller, methodically laid out the narrative of the crime and the long road to justice. Jurors heard from key witnesses that brought the story to life. Detective Wendy Kipple took the stand to explain the breakthrough of genetic genealogy, how a Herculean effort and modern science pointed to Phillips. The defense tried to poke holes in this process, suggesting the DNA evidence might have been contaminated or mishandled over so many years. They scrutinized the chain of custody of the decades-old samples and the relatively new, sometimes misunderstood method of genealogical triangulation. But experts testified to the integrity of the evidence and the minuscule likelihood of any DNA mix-up. The cold, hard science was hard to refute. Prosecutors also called Jim Hartke, the original CBI agent, now retired, who recounted the crime scenes in vivid detail. Hartke described finding Bobby Joe's gloves stained with a stranger's blood, the zip tie on her wrist, and the inexplicable orange sock on Hoosier Pass. He then dramatically recounted the moment at Annette's autopsy when he saw the matching sock on her foot, a discovery that drew gasps even in the courtroom. This was the turning point clue in 1982, and now it became a turning point in the trial, painting Phillips as the common denominator in both murders. Another powerful moment came when the fire chief Dave Montoya testified about the eerie rescue at Guanella Pass. He told the jury how he found Alan Phillips flashing SOS and pulled him to safety that night, noticing Phillips had a fresh injury on his face. Montoya's testimony connected a crucial dot. Prosecutors argued that Bobby Joe had likely inflicted that wound fighting for her life. The brass key ring Jeff made for her was essentially a weapon, and investigators believed Bobby struck Phillips in the face with it, on his forehead, during the struggle. The jurors could hardly miss the irony. Perhaps most damning, the prosecution introduced evidence of Phillips's past misconduct. Over defense objections, the judge allowed limited testimony about the 1973 incident where Phillips had attacked a female hitchhiker. Hearing that Phillips had a known history of preying on hitchhikers gave the jury insight into a pattern. This was not some innocent man wrongly accused, but someone who had tried something similar before. The defense, for their part, argued there was reasonable doubt. They suggested that the prosecution's narrative was built on circumstantial links. Phillips's attorney claimed that because the murder weapon was never recovered and there was no eyewitnesses, the state's case was incomplete. They also floated alternative suspects, hinting at Tom Luther or others, but those fell flat given the DNA match to Phillips. The defense's most pointed strategy was attacking the forensic process, questioning how the genealogy search was conducted and whether Phillips's privacy rights were violated, an argument becoming more common as DNA genealogy solves cases. However, the judge had allowed the evidence and it clearly resonated with the jury. Alan Phillips himself chose not to testify. He sat quietly, at times shaking his head as witnesses recounted the horror of the crimes. He showed little visible remorse or emotion during the proceedings. After a trial that lasted a few weeks, it came time for closing arguments in September 2022. The prosecutor emphasized the long path to justice. Quote, for 40 years, these families have waited to know who killed their daughters, their sister, their mother. The evidence proves it was this man. The defense countered that the state had built a, quote, house of cards and urged jurors not to convict on a case built with new science but old evidence. But when jurors filed out to deliberate, the overwhelming feeling in the courtroom and in the gallery was that the truth had finally been laid bare. They did not deliberate long. On September 15, 2022, the jury returned with a verdict after roughly 5 hours. Guilty on all counts. Alan Lee Phillips, at age 71, was convicted of the murders of Annette Schnee and Bobby Joe Oberholzer, as well as multiple related charges. In the gallery, members of the Schnee and Oberholzer families let out a collective breath. Some wept, some hugged. Laurie Merlot described the wait for the verdict as pins and needles. When the word guilty echoed through the courtroom, emotion overflowed. Quote, I was cheated out of 40 years without my sister, Laurie later said, voice shaking. We'd still be best of friends today if she was still here. Annette's sister Karen was astonished that this day had come at all. Quote, the way we were able to get the DNA and catch him was amazing, she said. Justice, so long deferred, had finally arrived. In early November 2022, the court reconvened for Phillips' sentencing. This hearing was, if possible, even more emotional. Family members of victims had the opportunities to address the court and Phillips, describing the impact of his crimes. Annette's sister, Cindy French, who had been the little girl overhearing the phone call in 1982, was now a grown woman with children of her own. She revealed that she had named her eldest daughter Annette after the sister who never came home. She noted the cruel irony that while her sister never got to live out her life, Phillips had been able to, quote, remain free for decades and have wives and children, end quote. Bobby Joe's family spoke as well. Perhaps most heart-wrenching was a statement from Jackie Wukos Walker, Bobby Joe's daughter. And yes, Bobby Joe had a little girl, something that was rarely publicized. Jackie was just a young child when her mother was murdered, and she described a childhood marked by, quote, sadness, depression, and anxiety. She told of crying so many nights into a particular pillow embroidered with a horse that the fabric was soaked with her tears. Growing up without her mom, Jackie felt alienated. She avoided talking about her loss because it upset others, leaving her to grieve in silence. I felt like I made everyone sad, she said in her statement. When given a chance to speak, Alan Phillips declined to address the court. He offered no apology, no explanation. Instead, the only voice in his defense came from his daughter, Andrea Phillips. In a brief, strange statement, Andrea expressed sympathy for the victims' families, but also spoke of forgiveness and her belief in her father's goodness. He is a good man, and I thought someone should say something, she said, describing how he had taught her and her siblings honesty and ethics growing up. One could hear a pin drop as she spoke. Even those who disagreed with her perspective could feel the tragedy from her side as well. She too was losing a parent, albeit by his own doing. Judge Stephen Broom delivered the sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole, and not just one life term, but 2, to be served consecutively. This was a symbolic gesture to ensure that each woman's life was honored with its own measure of justice. I hope the healing starts today, and God be with you, Judge Broom said to the families as he concluded the hearing. After 40 years, the case was closed. Alan Phillips, at 71, was led away in handcuffs, destined to spend his remaining days behind bars. Outside the courthouse, the snowy peaks of Hoosier Pass loomed in the distance. For those who remembered 1982, it was as if a long, cold winter had finally given way to spring sunshine. Reporters asked Charlie McCormick how he felt. The 80-year-old private investigator smiled and said he was grateful he lived to see this day. "You can't walk away from a case like this," he said, reaffirming the motto that had kept him going all those years. Despite all this happiness, though, not long after his conviction in February 2023, Alan Phillips died by suicide in prison. He ended his life just as he had lived it since 1982, taking an escape route. Some family members of Bobby and Annette felt a flicker of frustration that Phillips cheated them of the chance to see him live out his days in a cell, waking up every day to punishment. Others felt his death closed the final chapter and spared everyone years of drawn-out appeals and hearings. In either case, Phillips would never hurt anyone again. In Breckenridge and Alma, people still remember Bobby Joe and Annette. Each year, family and friends quietly mark the anniversaries of their deaths. Annette's siblings keep her memory alive through their children and in scrapbooks of her smiling face before she left for Colorado. Bobby Joe's sister Laurie says she still thinks of Bobby daily. What would she be like in her 60s? Would she have grandchildren now? Those questions linger painfully. For the community, the case's resolution was also a cautionary tale that echoed long after 1982. Hitchhiking culture in the high Rockies never fully recovered. The free rides and carefree trust of the late 70s and early 80s gave way to more cautious habits. In the end, the Orange Sock murders have become a part of Colorado lore, a tale of how, even if we forget, the mountains remember, and they come back to remind us.
If you like what we do here at Desi Studios and absolutely love what we're wearing today, this is merch you can go buy all for yourself.
You can buy this Desi Crime merch in our YouTube store on the link down below at Karak Merch. Keep the engines at Desi Studios rolling so we can pay our videographer right behind the camera to make these amazing episodes just for you.